My name is Geneva Williams, and at 68 years old, I never expected to be thrown out of my own house. After my husband died, I moved in with my son Daniel, using my retirement savings to help him buy his dream home. I legally owned 75% of that house, but my daughter-in-law Amanda never respected that fact. One Friday afternoon, she kicked me to the curb without warning, thinking she had won. She had no idea what was coming when I returned with someone special. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my daughter-in-law, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if you have ever had to stand up for yourself when family betrayed you. I spent 40 years of my life as an English teacher at Lincoln High School in Portland, helping young minds discover the beauty of literature and the power of words. My husband Frank and I had a beautiful life together, raising our only son Daniel and building a modest but comfortable future. Frank worked as an electrical engineer, and between our two salaries we managed to put Daniel through college and save a decent amount for our retirement. When Frank passed away from a sudden heart attack 5 years ago, my whole world shattered. After 40 years of marriage, I found myself alone in our 3-bedroom house, surrounded by memories and photographs of a life that no longer existed. The silence was deafening. Daniel was my rock during that difficult time. He would drive over every weekend from his apartment across town, help me with household repairs, and take me out to Sunday brunch. Our relationship had always been close, but grief brought us even closer. Daniel worked as a software engineer for a tech company, and while he made a decent salary, the housing market in our area had become incredibly expensive. He had been saving for a down payment for years, but it seemed like every time he got close, home prices would jump again, putting his dream of homeownership just out of reach. One Sunday over brunch, about 2 years after Frank passed, Daniel confided in me about his frustration with throwing money away on rent while struggling to save enough for a house. "Mom, at this rate I will be 50 before I can afford anything decent in a good neighborhood," he said, pushing his eggs around on his plate. That conversation planted a seed in my mind. My house felt too big and empty for just me, and my retirement savings were substantial thanks to Frank's life insurance and our careful planning. Daniel was my only child, and I wanted to help him achieve his dreams. A month later, I proposed an idea that would change both our lives. I would sell my house and contribute 75% of the down payment on a new home that we would share. Daniel would be on the mortgage, but I would be on the deed as a 75% owner. We would live together, sharing expenses, and I would have a separate suite for privacy. It seemed like the perfect solution. By this time, Daniel had been dating Amanda for about a year. They had met through mutual friends at a company picnic. Amanda worked in pharmaceutical sales, a career that seemed to suit her outgoing personality and determination. When Daniel first introduced us, I found her charming and vivacious. She had a way of lighting up a room and making everyone feel special. She asked thoughtful questions about my teaching career and showed genuine interest in my stories about Frank. When Daniel told Amanda about our plan to buy a house together, she seemed enthusiastic and supportive. She even helped us look at properties, pointing out features that would work well for a multi-generational household. I remember feeling relieved that she was so accepting of the arrangement. We found the perfect place after 3 months of searching: a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial with a finished basement that could be converted into a private suite for me. The house sat on a 1/4-acre lot in a lovely neighborhood, with tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors. The asking price was $600,000, a stretch for Daniel alone, but manageable with my contribution. I sold my house for $350,000 and put $300,000 toward the down payment on the new house. Daniel contributed $100,000 from his savings. We signed all the necessary legal paperwork establishing our respective ownership percentages, and just like that, we became co-owners of a beautiful home. The wedding took place 3 years ago, a tasteful ceremony in a local botanical garden. I helped Amanda with many of the arrangements, and we seemed to bond over flower selections and cake tastings. On the wedding day, I felt a mixture of joy and melancholy. Happy for my son finding love, but wishing Frank could have been there to see his boy married. "You look stunning," I told Amanda as I helped adjust her veil in the bridal suite. "Thank you, Geneva," she replied, squeezing my hand. "I am so happy to officially become part of your family." After the honeymoon, we all moved into the house together. I took the converted basement suite, which had its own small kitchen bathroom and separate entrance. It gave me independence while still being connected to the family. I made sure to establish some boundaries right away, wanting to give the newlyweds their space. I will do my own shopping and cooking most nights, I explained. But maybe we could have Sunday dinners together as a family tradition. They agreed, and for a while everything seemed perfect. I helped with household chores and gardening skills I had honed over decades of homemaking. When Amanda became pregnant a year into their marriage, I was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a grandmother. Little Ethan came into our lives a perfect bundle with Daniel's eyes and Amanda's smile. I was happy to help with babysitting when needed, giving the new parents time for date nights or simply to catch up on sleep. Holding my grandson in my arms brought back wonderful memories of when Daniel was a baby. Yet even in those early days, there were subtle signs of tension. Amanda would sometimes rearrange items I had organized in the kitchen or redo laundry I had already folded, claiming it needed to be done her way. Small comments about my cooking being a bit old-fashioned or suggestions that I should modernize my wardrobe began to pepper our interactions. Daniel traveled frequently for work, sometimes for a week or more at a time. During these periods, I noticed Amanda becoming more territorial about the house. She would mention casually how nice it would be to use my suite as a home office or gym once I decided to move to a retirement community. Amanda's parents, Harold and Patricia, began visiting more frequently after Ethan was born. They lived about 3 hours away and would stay for long weekends. From the beginning, they treated me with a polite but distant attitude, as if I were a tenant rather than a co-owner of the home. Patricia would often take over the kitchen during their visits, subtly pushing me aside. Harold had a habit of talking about me in the third person, even when I was present. "Does she always keep her things all over the living room?" he once asked Amanda, gesturing to a single book and reading glasses I had left on the coffee table. Despite these undercurrents, I tried to maintain a positive attitude. This was my family after all, and relationships require patience and understanding. I kept reminding myself that change is difficult for everyone, and we were still adjusting to our blended household arrangement. I cherished the quiet moments with Ethan, reading him stories and teaching him simple words. At 4 years old, he was curious and affectionate, always running to greet me with hugs when I came upstairs. Those moments made any tension with Amanda worthwhile. Little did I know that these subtle frictions were just the beginning of a betrayal I never could have imagined from people I considered family. The real trouble began when Daniel left for a 2-week business trip to Japan. His company was expanding into the Asian market, and as one of their senior software engineers, his expertise was crucial for setting up their new systems. He was excited about the opportunity, but concerned about leaving Amanda alone with 4-year-old Ethan for so long. "Mom, would you mind helping out more while I am gone?" he asked the night before his departure. "Maybe you could take Ethan to preschool some mornings or cook dinner for everyone a few nights a week." Of course, I assured him. That is what family is for. Do not worry about a thing. Daniel hugged me tightly. "I do not know what we would do without you, Mom." The first few days after Daniel left were relatively normal. I took Ethan to preschool in the mornings, allowing Amanda to get to work on time. I prepared dinner most evenings, simple but nutritious meals that I thought everyone would enjoy. However, by the 4th day, I noticed a distinct change in Amanda's behavior. She began criticizing my cooking more openly. "This casserole is too bland," she commented one evening, barely touching her food. "And there is way too much sodium in it. It is not really healthy for Ethan." I had used the same recipe for years, one that Daniel had always enjoyed, but I bit my tongue and simply nodded. "I can try something different tomorrow," I offered. The next morning, I found that Amanda had rearranged my carefully organized pantry shelves. When I mentioned it, she shrugged dismissively. "I could not find anything the way you had it set up." This makes more sense. It was not just the kitchen that became a battleground. Amanda began criticizing how I interacted with Ethan. "Please do not let him have snacks so close to dinner," she snapped when I gave him a small apple. "And you really should not carry him up the stairs. He is too big for that, and you could hurt yourself or him." I had been an educator and mother for decades, yet suddenly my judgment was being questioned at every turn. Still, I tried to respect that Amanda was Ethan's mother and had the right to make decisions about his upbringing. One afternoon, while Ethan was napping, I overheard Amanda on the phone in the living room. I had not intended to eavesdrop, but her raised voice carried clearly down the hallway. "It is getting unbearable, Lisa," she was saying to her friend. "She hovers all the time, acting like she knows better than me how to raise my own child. And you should see how she has taken over the kitchen. I can barely find anything anymore." I froze in the hallway, hurt blossoming in my chest. Was that really how she saw me? As an interfering mother-in-law? "Daniel is too blinded by loyalty to see how controlling she is," Amanda continued. "I mean, I get that she put money into the house, but that does not give her the right to act like she owns the place." But I did own the place, I thought to myself. 75% of it legally. The situation worsened when Amanda's parents arrived unannounced the following weekend. They brought several large suitcases, suggesting a longer stay than their usual weekend visits. "Mom and Dad are going to help out while Daniel is away," Amanda explained vaguely when I inquired how long they planned to stay. That evening, I found myself excluded from the family dinner. Amanda had ordered takeout for herself, Ethan, and her parents, but had not bothered to ask if I wanted anything. When I came upstairs to get myself something to eat, the conversation at the dining table abruptly halted. "We did not know you were joining us," Patricia said with a tight smile. "There is not really enough food to go around." I retreated to my suite, feeling like an unwelcome stranger in my own home. The next day brought another disturbing discovery. The family photos I had placed in the living room, including several of Daniel as a child, and one precious picture of him with his father, had been removed. In their place were new photos of Amanda, Daniel, and Ethan, along with several of Amanda with her parents. When I asked about my photos, Amanda replied casually, "Oh, I just thought the room needed updating. Your old pictures did not really match the new decor. I put them in a box somewhere." That somewhere turned out to be a plastic storage bin in the garage, my precious memories tossed aside like unwanted clutter. As the days passed, Amanda and her parents became increasingly territorial about the house. I found myself restricted from using certain areas. The sunroom, which had been a favorite reading spot of mine, was suddenly not a good place for you to be, Geneva. "The chairs are not supportive enough for someone your age," according to Patricia. The upstairs guest bathroom was now reserved for family. Amanda informed me, directing me to use only the bathroom in my basement suite. My attempts to reach Daniel became increasingly difficult. Whenever I tried to call him, Amanda would intercept, saying he was in meetings or that the time difference made it a bad time to talk. My text messages went unanswered for days, which was unusual for my son, who had always been attentive. Feeling increasingly isolated, I tried to have a heart-to-heart conversation with Amanda. I caught her alone in the kitchen one morning after her parents had taken Ethan to the park. "Amanda, I feel like something has changed." I began cautiously. "I get the sense that you are unhappy with me living here. Can we talk about what is bothering you?" Amanda barely looked up from her coffee. "Nothing is bothering me, Geneva. I am just trying to establish some routines and boundaries that work for my family." "This is my family, too," I reminded her gently. "And my home." Her expression hardened. "Look, I appreciate that you helped with the down payment. But this is Daniel, and my house now. We are raising our child here. Maybe it is time you considered other living arrangements that would be better suited to your stage of life." I was stunned by her directness. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "There are some lovely retirement communities nearby," she said, her voice falsely bright. "Places where you would have friends your own age, and activities designed for seniors. It would be so much better for you than rattling around in a basement suite by yourself." The conversation left me shaken. This was not what Daniel and I had agreed upon. The house purchase was meant to be a permanent arrangement, not a temporary stepping stone until Amanda decided she wanted me gone. That night, I lay awake, worrying about what might happen next. Amanda had shown her true colors, and I had a sinking feeling that things were about to get much worse. By the beginning of the second week of Daniel's absence, Amanda's behavior crossed from merely cold to openly hostile. I woke up early Monday morning to the sound of heavy footsteps and furniture being moved upstairs. Concerned, I made my way up to investigate. and found Harold and Patricia moving their suitcases and personal belongings into the guest bedroom across from Ethan's room. "What is going on?" I asked, still in my robe and slippers. Patricia barely glanced my way. "We are moving our things from the downstairs guest room to this one. It is more convenient for helping with Ethan." "But that room is where Daniel works when he is home," I pointed out. "His computer and all his files are in there." "Amanda has already moved his things to the basement," Harold replied dismissively. "He hardly uses this space anyway with all his traveling." Before I could respond, Amanda appeared behind me. "Mom and Dad are going to be staying with us for a while," she announced. "We thought it would make sense for them to have a proper room upstairs." "How long is a while?" I asked. Amanda shrugged. "We have not really decided yet. Could be a few weeks, could be longer." Later that day, I went to retrieve a book from my small bookshelf in the living room, only to find it completely empty. Following a hunch, I checked the basement and discovered all my books along with my knitting supplies, and the small television I sometimes watched in the living room had been relocated to my suite without my permission. When I confronted Amanda, she was unapologetic. "We needed to make space for Mom and Dad's things," she explained. "It is just temporary. Besides, do not you prefer having all your stuff in your own space?" "Amanda, this is my home too," I said firmly. "You cannot just move my belongings without asking me." "Actually," she replied with a cold smile, "Daniel and I have been talking about making some changes to the living arrangements. He agrees that it would be better if you kept your personal items in your own area." I knew this was a lie. Daniel and I had spoken briefly by phone just 2 days earlier, and he had mentioned nothing about changing our living arrangement. But it was becoming clear that Amanda was creating a narrative to justify pushing me out. The situation escalated further when I discovered I could no longer access the house through the front door. Amanda had changed the code on the digital lock without informing me. One afternoon after returning from a walk, I punched in my usual code only to have the system flash red and emit a harsh beeping sound. After several failed attempts, the alarm began blaring. Moments later, Amanda flung open the door, her face a mask of irritation. "What are you doing?" she demanded loudly, making no move to silence the piercing alarm. "My code is not working," I explained, embarrassed as neighbors began peering out their windows at the commotion. "Oh, we changed it yesterday," she said offhandedly, finally entering the master code to silence the alarm. "For security reasons. You should use your private entrance downstairs anyway." The humiliation of being locked out of my own home with neighbors watching was almost unbearable. Amanda made no attempt to tell me the new code, making it clear I was expected to use only the basement entrance from now on like a tenant rather than an owner. Inside the house was beginning to feel foreign to me. Amanda's parents had taken over the kitchen, rearranging everything to their liking. My special occasion china, which I had brought from my previous home, had been packed away to make room for Patricia's cooking gadgets. The refrigerator was filled with unfamiliar foods, and notes with "Do Not Touch" were affixed to certain containers. Meals became an exercise in exclusion. Amanda, her parents, and Ethan would eat together in the dining room, their conversation and laughter floating down to my basement suite. No one bothered to invite me, and when I occasionally ventured upstairs during their mealtimes, the conversation would stop abruptly, resuming only in whispers after I left. Even more hurtful was being excluded from activities with my grandson. I would hear them preparing to take Ethan to the park or the children's museum, only for them to leave without a word to me. When I asked if I could join them for an outing, Patricia would say, "We already have our plans set. Maybe another time." That other time never seemed to come. One evening, I overheard a conversation that chilled me to the bone. I had come upstairs to make a cup of tea, only to freeze outside the dining room when I heard my name mentioned. "Once the old lady is gone, we can turn that basement into a proper entertainment space," Harold was saying. "Knock down a few walls, put in a wet bar and a big screen television. And we can finally renovate the kitchen the way you have always wanted," Patricia added. "No more working around her old-fashioned tastes." "Daniel will come around," Amanda assured them. "He feels obligated to his mother, but he will see this is better for everyone. Besides, at her age, she should be in a place with medical staff nearby." I was 68, in excellent health, and fully capable of independent living. Their characterization of me as decrepit and in need of care was as insulting as it was false. Later that evening, Harold cornered me in the hallway. "Amanda mentioned you contributed to the down payment," he said without preamble. "Very generous of you, but you know investments do not always work out the way we plan." "It was not an investment," I replied firmly. "I am a legal co-owner of this property." He chuckled condescendingly. "Well, family situations change. Daniel and Amanda need to think about what is best for their nuclear family now. Surely you understand that." His implication was clear: my presence was no longer welcome, regardless of my legal rights to the property. That night, sleep eluded me completely. Anxiety gnawed at my stomach as I tried to make sense of what was happening. How had my daughter-in-law turned so completely against me? And why were her parents suddenly moving in as if they owned the place? The next morning, I used Amanda's laptop, which she had left open on the kitchen counter, to check my email. A notification popped up for a recently visited website, Sunshine Meadows Senior Living Community. She had been researching places to send me without my knowledge or consent. I scrolled through her browser history, my hands shaking, and found more searches: how to remove elderly parent from deed senior living facilities, Medicaid, and most disturbing of all, legal ways to force sale of jointly owned property. It was becoming terrifyingly clear. Amanda was not just trying to make me uncomfortable enough to leave voluntarily. She and her parents were actively planning to force me out and take full control of the house I had largely paid for. As I closed the laptop, I caught sight of a handwritten list on the counterparty supplies. Further down was written: housewarming celebration this weekend. A housewarming party. For a house they had lived in for 2 years. Unless, of course, they were celebrating a new beginning. One that did not include me. My anxiety turned to resolve. I needed to reach Daniel immediately and warn him about what was happening in his absence. But first, I needed proof, something concrete he could not dismiss as a misunderstanding or paranoia on my part. Friday morning dawned bright and clear, a cruel contrast to the dark storm brewing inside our house. Daniel had been gone for 12 days now, with just 2 more until his scheduled return. I had spent a restless night planning how to document Amanda's behavior and gather evidence of her plans before confronting my son with the truth. I made my way upstairs around 9, hoping to grab a quick breakfast before everyone else was up. To my surprise, Amanda, Harold, and Patricia were already in the kitchen, huddled together at the island counter. They fell silent the moment I entered. "Good morning," I said, forcing a smile. No one returned the greeting. Amanda glanced at her parents, some unspoken communication passing between them. "Geneva, we need to talk," she finally said, her voice clipped and businesslike. "Of course," I replied, my stomach tightening with apprehension. "What about—" Harold cleared his throat. "The living situation here is not working out." "We have given it a lot of thought," Patricia added, "and it would be best for everyone if you found alternative accommodation." Amanda nodded. "We need the space, Geneva. Ethan is growing, and we are thinking of having another baby soon. Plus, Mom and Dad are going to be staying with us more permanently." I stood frozen, processing their words. Even though I had overheard their plans, hearing them stated so bluntly to my face was still shocking. "This is my home," I said quietly but firmly. "I own 75% of this house. I have legal rights." Amanda's expression hardened. "Actually, we have been talking to a lawyer. The money you contributed was a gift to help us get started. There is no binding agreement that you get to live here indefinitely." "That is completely false," I protested, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "There are legal documents establishing my ownership percentage. Daniel and I had a clear understanding." "Daniel has changed his mind," Amanda said coldly. "He agrees that this arrangement is no longer suitable." Another lie. I was certain Daniel had no idea what was happening, but without being able to reach him directly, I could not confirm my suspicions. "I want to speak to my son," I insisted. "He is busy with meetings all day," Amanda replied smoothly. "Besides, we have already discussed this as a family. The decision is made." I looked around the kitchen, noticing for the first time several boxes stacked by the back door. With a jolt, I recognized my handwriting on some of the labels. "What are those?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "We took the liberty of packing most of your things," Patricia said, as if she had done me a favor. "Just the essentials, of course. The rest can be dealt with later." The violation of having strangers go through my personal belongings, deciding what was essential, sent a wave of indignation through me. "You had no right to touch my things," I said, my voice shaking. "Look," Geneva Harold interjected, stepping toward me in a way that felt vaguely threatening. "You can make this easy or difficult. But either way, you need to leave today." "Today?" I echoed in disbelief. "You expect me to just walk out with nowhere to go?" "We have found a nice assisted living facility that has an opening." Patricia offered, her false sympathy more insulting than Harold's directness. "Very reasonable rates, and they can take you immediately." "I am not going to an assisted living facility," I exclaimed. "I am perfectly capable of independent living, and I am not leaving my home." Amanda's expression turned ugly. "Either you leave willingly with your things packed neatly, or we will put them on the front lawn. Your choice." The ultimatum hung in the air between us. I looked from face to face, searching for any sign of compassion or reason, but found only cold determination. "I want to see these supposed legal documents you claim show my contribution was a gift," I demanded. Amanda disappeared into the study, returning moments later with a folder. She pulled out a document and thrust it toward me. I scanned it quickly, my blood running cold. It appeared to be a letter stating that I, Geneva Williams, was gifting the sum of $300,000 to Daniel and Amanda, without expectation of repayment or ownership interest in their property. The signature at the bottom looked vaguely like mine, but I had never seen this document before, let alone signed it. "This is a forgery," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I never signed this." "It has been notarized," Harold pointed out, tapping a seal at the bottom of the page. "Legally binding." I later learned that the notary stamp itself was fake, but in that moment I felt trapped and powerless. "I want to call Daniel," I insisted again. "That is not happening," Amanda snapped. "Now, are you going to leave with dignity, or do we need to make this more difficult?" My mind raced, trying to find a way out of this nightmare. I needed time to think, to plan, to gather real evidence. Fighting them now alone and unprepared would only make things worse. "I need to get some things from my room," I said finally. "Mom will go with you," Amanda replied immediately. "To help." To supervise, she meant. To make sure I did not take anything they had decided I should not have. Patricia followed me downstairs to my suite, hovering as I gathered some clothes, medications, and a few precious photographs. My hands trembled as I packed a small suitcase, my mind still struggling to accept that this was really happening. When we returned upstairs, Harold had already carried several boxes of my belongings out to the driveway. Amanda stood by the front door holding my purse and coat. "Your wallet and ID are in there," she said, handing me the purse. I made sure everything important was included. The fact that she had gone through my most personal items, deciding what was important, felt like yet another violation. As I stepped outside, I saw neighbors watching curiously from across the street. The humiliation of being evicted from my own home with an audience no less brought tears to my eyes that I refused to let fall. "What about the rest of my things?" I asked, looking at the many boxes still inside. "We will store them safely until you have a permanent address," Amanda replied, though her tone suggested my remaining possessions might mysteriously disappear. "And my ownership of the house," I pressed. "That does not just go away because you want it to." Amanda's smile was cold. "We will have our lawyer contact you about buying out your interest, assuming there is any legal claim left. For now, I suggest you focus on finding somewhere to stay." With those parting words, she closed the door firmly in my face. I stood on the driveway, suitcase in hand, utterly lost and alone. A neighbor I had spoken with occasionally, Mrs. Chen from 2 doors down, approached hesitantly. "Geneva, is everything all right?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. I could not bring myself to explain the humiliating reality. "Just a family disagreement," I managed. "Would you be able to call me a taxi? I seem to have left my phone inside." 20 minutes later, I checked into a modest hotel about 2 miles from the house. The front desk clerk gave me a strange look as I'd paid for 3 nights with my credit card, probably wondering why an older woman with just one suitcase needed a hotel room. Once alone in the sterile hotel room, the full weight of what had happened crashed down on me. I sank onto the bed and finally allowed the tears to come, great heaving sobs that seemed to rise from the very core of my being. Not just for the loss of my home and possessions, but for the betrayal by someone I had welcomed into my family, someone I had tried to love as a daughter. After crying until no more tears would come, I washed my face with cold water and tried to think clearly. I needed to reach Daniel. I tried calling his cell phone again, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message asking him to call me urgently, but I had no way of knowing if Amanda had access to his voicemail as well. In desperation, I searched online for his company's main number and called their headquarters. After being transferred several times, I finally reached someone in Daniel's department. "I am sorry, Mrs. Williams, but Daniel is currently at a mountain retreat with the executive team," his colleague explained. "It is part of their cultural immersion experience. There is no cell service there, and they will not be back until Sunday evening Japan time." "This is an emergency," I pleaded. "Is there any way to get a message to him?" "I am afraid not. The location was chosen specifically for its isolation. But I can make sure he knows you called urgently as soon as they return to Tokyo." I thanked him and hung up, feeling more alone than ever. Daniel was literally on the other side of the world, completely unreachable. By the time he returned to civilization, Amanda would have had 3 more days to spin whatever story she wanted about my voluntary departure. That night, lying awake in the unfamiliar hotel room, I cycled through emotions, disbelief, rage, grief, and finally, as dawn broke, a cold determination. I had spent my life being reasonable, accommodating, putting others first. Look where that had gotten me: homeless and betrayed at 68 years old. No more. Amanda and her parents had declared war, and it was time I started fighting back. I might be older, but I was far from helpless. I had resources they did not know about, and most importantly, I had the truth on my side. As the first light of morning filtered through the cheap hotel curtains, I made a decision. I would not wait for Daniel to return and save me. I would save myself, and in the process, I would teach my daughter-in-law a lesson she would never forget. Saturday morning, I woke with a clarity I had not felt in weeks. The shock and grief had hardened into resolve overnight. I might have been forced out of my home, but I was far from defeated. My first step was to understand exactly where I stood legally. I called an attorney I had consulted during the original house purchase, explaining my situation and asking for an emergency weekend appointment. To my relief, Lawrence Goldstein, a kind man in his 60s who specialized in real estate law, agreed to meet me at his office at 11 that morning. "Based on what you have told me, Mrs. Williams, your position is actually quite strong," Lawrence assured me after reviewing the original paperwork. "The deed clearly states your 75% ownership. Any document claiming you gifted, that money would need to supersede this, and a hastily forged letter will not hold up in court." "What about them changing the locks and removing my belongings?" I asked. "That is an illegal eviction, plain and simple," he replied, his expression grim. "As a legal co-owner, you have every right to occupy the property. They cannot remove you without proper legal proceedings, which would be extremely difficult given your ownership stake." "So, what are my options?" Lawrence leaned back in his chair, considering. "We could file for an emergency injunction, forcing them to allow you back into the property immediately. We could also pursue damages for the illegal eviction and the emotional distress it caused." These were all valid legal remedies, but something told me a protracted legal battle would only create more bitterness and might ultimately hurt Daniel and my grandson Ethan. I needed a solution that would resolve the situation decisively while minimizing long-term damage to family relationships. "What about selling my share of the property?" I asked. "Can I do that without Daniel and Amanda's agreement?" Lawrence nodded slowly. "As a majority owner, you have the right to force a sale of the entire property if necessary. However, there are less nuclear options. You could sell your share to a third party who would then become a co-owner with your son and daughter-in-law." This sparked an idea. "And would that new co-owner have the right to occupy the property?" "Absolutely," Lawrence confirmed. "They would have all the same rights you currently have." The seed of a plan began to form in my mind. One more question, Lawrence. If I were to sell my share, would the new owner have any say in who else lives in the house? For instance, Amanda's parents who have moved in without any legal right. Lawrence's eyes twinkled with understanding. Any owner has the right to question unauthorized occupants. If Amanda's parents are not on the deed or a formal lease, they are essentially guests, and their continued presence would require agreement from all owners. I left Lawrence's office with a clear plan and his promise to prepare the necessary paperwork immediately. My next task was to check on my financial situation. At my bank, I discovered something disturbing. There had been attempts to access my savings account the previous day using my online banking credentials. Fortunately, the bank's security system had flagged the attempts as suspicious, since they came from an unfamiliar device and had temporarily locked the account. "Would you like to see the location where the access attempts originated?" the bank manager asked. When she showed me the IP address information, it confirmed my suspicions. The attempts had come from my own house, almost certainly from Amanda, using personal information she had gathered while going through my belongings. I immediately changed all my passwords and added extra security verification steps to my accounts. The manager also suggested moving my funds to new accounts that Amanda would have no knowledge of, which I did promptly. With my legal position clarified and my finances secured, I moved on to the next phase of my plan. I needed to find someone willing to buy my share of the property, someone who would understand the unusual circumstances and be willing to play along with what I had in mind. Fortune smiled on me that afternoon. While having lunch at a cafe near my hotel, I overheard a conversation at the next table. A man in a sharp suit was discussing property values in my neighborhood with a colleague. "The market there is red hot right now," he was saying. "If we could find anything in that area, we could easily develop it for a 40% return." Gathering my courage, I approached their table. "Excuse me, I could not help overhearing. Are you interested in properties in the Cedar Heights neighborhood?" The man looked surprised but nodded. "Jackson Bennett," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "Apex Development. And yes, we are very interested in that area, but inventory is extremely limited." "I may have something that would interest you," I replied. "I own 75% of a property there that I am looking to sell quickly." Jackson's eyebrows rose. 75%, that is an unusual arrangement. "It is a long story," I said with a small smile. "But I would be happy to tell you over coffee if you have time." 2 hours later, Jackson Bennett had heard my entire story and was intrigued by both the investment opportunity and, I suspect, the chance to be part of such an unusual situation. "Let me get this straight," he said, leaning forward. "Your daughter-in-law has illegally evicted you from a property you mostly own, moved her parents in without permission, and is now planning some sort of housewarming party as if the house is entirely hers." "That is correct," I confirmed. "And my son has no idea any of this is happening because he is unreachable in Japan until Sunday night." Jackson shook his head in disbelief. "And you want to sell me your 75% share, which would make me the majority owner, correct?" "Yes. The property is worth approximately $750,000 in the current market. My share would be $562,500. However, I am willing to sell for $500,000, even for a quick cash transaction." He whistled low. "That is still a substantial investment on short notice." "The property is in an excellent location, well-maintained, and, as you yourself noted, in a highly desirable neighborhood where inventory is scarce," I pointed out. "Even if you eventually resold, you would make a profit." Jackson studied me for a moment. "What exactly are you hoping to accomplish here, Mrs. Williams? It seems like there is more to this than just wanting to sell your share quickly." I appreciated his directness. "Honestly, Mr. Bennett, I want my daughter-in-law to understand the consequences of her actions. I want her to realize that treating people poorly, especially family, can have serious repercussions. And yes, I want to see her face when she realizes that her plan has backfired spectacularly." To my surprise, Jackson grinned. "My own mother-in-law lives with us part-time. She can be a handful, but my wife and I would never dream of treating her the way your daughter-in-law has treated you. I find myself quite sympathetic to your situation." By that evening, Jackson had consulted with his business partners, and agreed to purchase my share. Lawrence worked overtime to prepare the necessary documents, and we arranged to meet at his office Sunday morning to finalize everything. That night, I received a text message from my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. "Thought you should know there seems to be a big party planned at your house tomorrow afternoon. Lots of deliveries arriving, catering vans, etc. Hope everything is okay with you." So Amanda was indeed going ahead with her housewarming celebration, probably announcing to friends and family that they now had the house to themselves with the troublesome mother-in-law conveniently removed. The timing could not have been more perfect for what I had planned. Sunday morning, I met with Jackson and Lawrence to sign the papers transferring my ownership share. Once everything was notarized and officially recorded, Jackson was legally the majority owner of the house where Amanda was preparing to host her victory party. "Are you sure you want to do this today?" Lawrence asked, as we finished the paperwork. "It might be better to wait until your son returns." "I am certain," I replied firmly. Amanda chose the timing of this confrontation, not me. She thought Daniel being away would give her the perfect opportunity to get rid of me. She did not count on me fighting back. Jackson checked his watch. "According to your neighbor, the party starts at 3. That gives us about 4 hours to prepare." We spent those hours carefully planning our approach. Lawrence prepared a formal letter stating that Jackson Bennett was now the legal majority owner of the property and had the right to determine who could reside there. He also drafted a notice requiring Amanda's parents to vacate as they were unauthorized occupants. At my suggestion, Jackson contacted a local real estate photographer who agreed to meet us at the house. For documentation purposes, I explained, and to have a neutral witness to what happens. By 2:30, we were ready. I had changed into a simple but elegant blue dress that projected confidence and dignity. Jackson wore his most professional suit, and Lawrence had brought along his paralegal to serve as an additional witness. As we pulled up to the house, I saw that Mrs. Chen had been right. There were several cars parked outside, and through the large front windows I could see people moving about inside. A banner hung over the front door reading, "Welcome to our home." The irony was almost too perfect. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and prepared to reclaim my dignity from those who had tried to strip it away. Whatever happened next, Amanda was about to learn a valuable lesson about underestimating a determined woman regardless of her age. At precisely 3:15, when the party would be in full swing, we approached the front door. My heart hammered in my chest, but outwardly I maintained a calm demeanor. This moment had been 2 days in the making, but it felt like the culmination of months of growing tension and disrespect. Jackson stood beside me, projecting the confident aura of a successful businessman. Lawrence and his paralegal Maria positioned themselves slightly behind us, legal documents at the ready. The photographer, a young woman named Stephanie, stood discreetly to one side, her professional camera hanging around her neck. I pressed the doorbell and heard the chime echo inside, followed by the sound of laughter and conversation. After a moment, the door swung open to reveal Amanda looking polished in a red dress, a glass of wine in her hand. Her smile froze and then crumbled as she registered my presence. "Geneva," she gasped, her face draining of color. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Amanda," I replied calmly. "I believe I still live here as 75% owner of this property." Her eyes darted nervously to the people standing with me. "This is a private party. You cannot just show up unannounced with strangers." "Oh, but Mr. Bennett is not a stranger," I said, gesturing to Jackson. "In fact, he has a very significant connection to this house." Amanda's brow furrowed in confusion. Before she could respond, Harold appeared behind her. "What is going on here?" he demanded, his face reddening at the sight of me. "I thought we had resolved this situation." By illegally evicting me from my own home, I asked, my voice steady but firm. "No, that situation is far from resolved." By now, several party guests had noticed the commotion and were gathering in the foyer, watching the scene unfold with curious expressions. I recognized neighbors, some of Amanda's friends from work, and even a few mutual acquaintances from Daniel's company. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation inside," I suggested, already stepping forward. Amanda moved to block me, but Jackson smoothly interjected. "As the legal majority owner of this property, I must insist you allow us entry." Majority owner Amanda repeated, her voice rising an octave. What are you talking about? Lawrence stepped forward, presenting the legal documents. My client, Mrs. Williams, has transferred her 75% ownership stake in this property to Mr. Jackson Bennett of Apex Development. These papers confirm the transaction, which was properly recorded this morning. Amanda snatched the papers, her hands visibly trembling as she scanned them. Harold looked over her shoulder, his face growing increasingly pale. This cannot be legal, Amanda protested weakly. I assure you it is entirely legal, Lawrence replied. Mrs. Williams was well within her rights to sell her share of the property to whomever she chose. By this point, we had moved into the foyer, and the party guests had fallen silent, watching the drama unfold with rapt attention. Patricia emerged from the kitchen, her festive apron contrasting sharply with her alarmed expression. What is happening? She asked, looking from Amanda to Harold and then freezing when she spotted me. Mrs. Williams has sold her ownership stake in the house, Harold explained tersely. To this developer. Jackson took this as his cue to address the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. My name is Jackson Bennett of Apex Development. As of this morning, I am the legal owner of 75% of this property. A murmur rippled through the assembled guests. I caught sight of Mrs. Chen, who gave me a subtle thumbs up from the back of the room. This is absurd, Amanda declared, trying to regain control of the situation. We are in the middle of a party. You cannot just barge in here with these ridiculous claims. Actually, Lawrence interjected, given that you illegally evicted Mrs. Williams from her own property, changed the locks without her consent, and removed her belongings without permission. You are fortunate. We are not accompanied by police officers. More whispers erupted among the guests. I could see some of them exchanging shocked glances, clearly surprised by this characterization of events. Amanda had probably told everyone I had moved out voluntarily, perhaps even that I had wanted to go to a retirement community. Is that true? Asked one of the neighbors, a woman I had often chatted with while gardening. Geneva, did they force you to leave? Before I could answer, Amanda cut in. Of course not. She agreed to move to a more suitable living situation for someone her age. This is all a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, I echoed, finally allowing some of my hurt and anger to show. You packed my belongings without my permission, presented me with forged documents claiming I had gifted my share of the house, and threatened to put my things on the lawn if I did not leave immediately, all while my son was unreachable in Japan. How exactly is that a misunderstanding? The collective gasp from the guests was audible. Amanda's carefully crafted image as the perfect daughter-in-law was crumbling before her eyes. That is not what happened, she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. We have witnesses, Lawrence noted calmly. And I suspect, if we check the security cameras from neighboring properties, we might find additional evidence of how Mrs. Williams was treated. This was a bluff, but the panic that flashed across Amanda's face suggested there was indeed something incriminating to be found in such footage. Jackson chose this moment to reassert his new position. As the majority owner of this property, I have some immediate concerns about unauthorized occupants. He turned to Patricia and Harold. I understand you two have moved in without being added to the deed or having a formal lease agreement. Patricia clutched at her husband's arm. We are family. We do not need formal agreements. I am afraid the law disagrees, Jackson replied. Lawrence, would you please provide them with the notice? Lawrence handed Harold a formal document. This is a notice requiring you to remove your belongings and vacate the premises within 48 hours, as you have no legal right to occupy this property. Harold's face turned an alarming shade of purple. This is outrageous. Our daughter and son-in-law invited us to live here. Your son-in-law owns only 25% of this property, Jackson pointed out. And based on what I have learned, he was not even informed of your permanent relocation here. A new voice cut through the tension. What is going on here? All heads turned toward the sound. Daniel stood in the doorway, his travel bag still in hand, looking exhausted and confused. My heart leapt at the sight of my son home earlier than expected. Daniel, Amanda cried. rushing toward him. "Thank goodness you are home. Your mother has done something terrible." Daniel's eyes found mine across the room, filled with confusion and concern. "Mom, what is happening? Why are there all these people here?" Before Amanda could control the narrative, I stepped forward. "Daniel, I tried to reach you. Amanda and her parents forced me out of the house while you were gone. They changed the locks, packed my things, and threatened me. They claimed you knew about it and approved." Daniel's face registered shock and disbelief. "What, I never agreed to anything like that. Amanda told me you were staying with a friend for a few days to give her parents space during their visit." Amanda's deception was now fully exposed. The party guests shifted uncomfortably, many beginning to gather their belongings, sensing that the celebration was definitely over. "Daniel, I can explain." Amanda began, her voice taking on a pleading quality. "Explain what," he demanded. "Explain why my mother was forced out of her own home. Explain why you lied to me about it." As the reality of the situation dawned on him, Daniel's expression hardened. He turned to Jackson. "And who are you, sir?" Jackson extended his hand. "Jackson Bennett. I recently purchased your mother's 75% share of this property." Daniel looked at me in shock. "You sold your share of the house. Why?" "Because I was thrown out with nowhere to go," I explained gently. "I needed to take control of the situation, and this seemed like the most effective way to do it." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, visibly trying to process everything. "I do not understand. Why would Amanda do this?" As if on cue, Amanda's phone began ringing. She glanced at it and quickly rejected the call, but not before Daniel saw the screen. "Why is my bank calling you on a Sunday?" he asked suspiciously. Amanda's face crumpled. "It is nothing. Just a routine thing." "Show me your phone, Amanda," Daniel demanded, his voice taking on an edge I had rarely heard from my gentle son. After a moment of hesitation, she handed it over. Daniel quickly navigated through it, his expression growing darker by the second. "You have been accessing my email and my voicemail." He looked up, betrayal etched across his features. "There are dozens of messages from my mother that were marked as read but never shown to me. And emails from my bank about unusual transfers." The final threads of Amanda's carefully woven deception were unraveling. She began to cry, but they were not the tears of someone sorry for what they had done, but rather of someone sorry they had been caught. "I was just trying to create a better life for us, for Ethan," she sobbed. "Your mother was always interfering, always reminding us that she owned most of the house. By contributing most of the money for it," Daniel exclaimed, "which she had every right to do as a co-owner." Patricia stepped forward, attempting to salvage the situation. "Daniel dear, surely you can see that having your mother living with you was not ideal for a young family. We were only trying to help create a more appropriate arrangement." By forging documents and throwing her out on the street, Daniel shot back. "How exactly is that helping?" The remaining party guests were now actively leaving, murmuring awkward goodbyes or simply slipping out unannounced. Only Mrs. Chen remained standing by my side in a silent show of support. Jackson cleared his throat. "Perhaps this would be a good time to discuss next steps regarding the property. As the majority owner, I have several options, including initiating a full sale of the house, which would require all current residents to vacate within 30 days. The threat hung in the air, causing Amanda and her parents to exchange panicked glances. "Is that what you want?" Mom, Daniel asked me quietly. "For all of us to have to leave?" I looked at my son, seeing the hurt and confusion in his eyes. Despite everything that had happened, he was still my child and I loved him deeply. "No," I replied softly. "That was never my intention. I just wanted to be treated with respect in a home that I helped create." Daniel nodded, understanding passing between us. He turned to Jackson. "Mr. Bennett, is there any possibility of working out an arrangement where my mother's interests are protected, but we do not lose our home entirely?" Jackson glanced at me, and I gave him a subtle nod. This was the opening I had been waiting for, the chance to resolve the situation in a way that taught a necessary lesson while preserving what mattered most. The confrontation had achieved its purpose. Amanda's cruel actions had been exposed, her deceptions revealed, and the balance of power decisively shifted. What happened next would determine whether this family could heal or would be permanently broken. The next few days were a whirlwind of difficult conversations and emotional reckonings. After the disastrous party, Daniel had asked Amanda's parents to move to a hotel while we sorted everything out. They had protested vehemently, but ultimately complied when Jackson made it clear he would pursue legal action if necessary. Daniel and I sat down with Jackson the following morning to discuss the future of the property. To my son's surprise and relief, Jackson revealed that our agreement included a clause allowing me to repurchase my share within 30 days if circumstances changed. I was never interested in forcing a family out of their home, Jackson explained. I just wanted to help Mrs. Williams regain her power and dignity in a situation where both had been stripped away. Daniel turned to me, his eyes filled with remorse. Mom, I am so sorry. I had no idea what was happening. Amanda told me you were happily staying with a friend while her parents visited. She intercepted all your calls and messages. I know, sweetheart, I assured him. I never believed you would knowingly allow me to be treated that way. The conversation with Amanda proved far more difficult. Daniel insisted on reviewing her phone and email accounts, discovering the full extent of her deception. Not only had she hidden my attempts to contact him, but she had also been making unauthorized transfers from their joint accounts to her parents. They needed help with their mortgage, she admitted tearfully when confronted. They were going to lose their house. I did not know how to tell you. So instead, you decided to throw my mother out of our house so your parents could move in, Daniel asked incredulously. How could you possibly think that was acceptable? Amanda had no good answer, only excuses and deflections. It became increasingly clear that she had never respected the financial arrangement that made our shared home possible, viewing my contribution not as a generous act from a mother who loved her son, but as an inconvenient obligation that needed to be eliminated. The truth about Amanda's parents' financial situation also came to light. They had refinanced their home multiple times, taking out equity for lavish vacations and luxury purchases they could not afford. Their plan had indeed been to sell their house, move in with Daniel and Amanda permanently, and use the proceeds to pay off their debts and maintain their lifestyle. 3 days after the confrontation, Daniel came to me with a decision. I cannot stay married to someone who would treat my mother this way, he said quietly. Someone who would lie to me so consistently and show such disrespect to the woman who raised me and helped us buy this house. My heart ached for my son. Are you sure, Daniel, marriage is complicated and people can change? He shook his head. It is not just what she did to you, Mom. It is the deception, the manipulation, the complete lack of integrity. How could I ever trust her again? What kind of example would that set for Ethan? By the end of the week, Daniel had filed for separation and begun the process of divorce. Amanda initially tried to fight it, claiming she had been misunderstood and that her intentions were good. But when Daniel presented evidence of her deceptions and financial manipulations, she finally accepted the inevitable. As for me, I made a decision of my own. Despite having the legal right to move back into the house, I realized that chapter of my life had closed. The house no longer felt like home after what had transpired there. I have found a lovely condo in a senior community. About 15 minutes from here, I told Daniel over coffee one morning. It has everything I need, plus activities and people my own age. I think it might be good for me to have my own space again. Daniel looked surprised. But you do not have to go, Mom. This is your house, too. I know, I assured him. And that is why I can choose to leave on my terms this time. You and Ethan need stability right now, and I need a fresh start. With Jackson's cooperation, we worked out a new arrangement. I would sell my 75% share back to Daniel at a fair market value, using the proceeds to purchase my new condo outright and establish a comfortable nest egg for my future. Daniel would take out a new mortgage to buy my share, becoming the sole owner of the house. Amanda and her parents found an apartment to rent across town. The divorce proceedings moved forward with Daniel maintaining primary custody of Ethan due to Amanda's demonstrated untrustworthiness. She received visitation rights, and I made sure never to speak ill of her to my grandson despite everything that had happened. My new home in Willow Creek Senior Community turned out to be a blessing I had not anticipated. My one-bedroom condo was bright and airy, with a small patio where I could continue my love of container gardening. More importantly, I found myself surrounded by peers who understood the joys and challenges of this stage of life. I made new friends, quickly joining a book club and a twice-weekly yoga class. Theodore, a charming widower from the building next door, began inviting me for coffee and walks in the community garden. At 68, I discovered that life could still hold new beginnings and unexpected joys. Daniel and Ethan visited me regularly, usually for Sunday dinners that became our new tradition. My relationship with my son grew stronger through the crisis we had weathered together, developing a new dimension of mutual respect and appreciation. One Sunday, as we sat on my patio watching Ethan play with the toy trucks I kept for his visits, Daniel broached a subject we had both been avoiding. "I keep thinking about how I missed the signs," he said. "How I did not see what Amanda was really like, how she was treating you when I was not around." "We see what we want to see in those we love," I replied gently. "You trusted her as you should have been able to trust your wife. Still, I should have protected you better." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "Daniel, you cannot protect everyone all the time. Sometimes people have to protect themselves, even from family." That was a lesson I needed to learn too. And it was true. For too long, I had allowed my desire to keep the peace and maintain family harmony to override my own sense of self-worth. I had tolerated small disrespects and mounting indignities, making excuses for Amanda's behavior, rather than confronting it directly. The crisis had forced me to stand up for myself in a way I had not done in years. It reminded me that age does not diminish our right to be treated with dignity and respect, especially by those who claim to love us. 6 months after moving into my new home, I used a portion of my house proceeds to establish a college fund for Ethan. Another portion went to a legal defense fund for seniors facing housing discrimination or elder abuse issues I had become passionate about through my own experience. Daniel eventually met Sarah, a kind kindergarten teacher, who treated both him and Ethan with genuine warmth and respect. When she first came to Sunday dinner at my condo, she brought homemade cookies and asked thoughtful questions about my teaching career. More importantly, she listened to the answers with real interest. The first time she met Amanda during a custody exchange, Sarah later told Daniel, "I will never understand how anyone could have treated Geneva that way. She is such a treasure." That comment relayed to me by my son, with pride in his eyes, healed something in me that I had not realized was still wounded. Life settles into new patterns if we allow it to. My days now are filled with chosen activities rather than imposed ones. I volunteer at the local library 2 afternoons a week, sharing my love of literature with a new generation of readers. I have lunch with friends from Willow Creek, enjoying the easy camaraderie of people with similar life experiences. And yes, Theodore and I continue our walks, which have extended beyond the community gardens to include local parks and museums. As for Amanda, I heard from Daniel that she eventually moved back in with her parents after they were forced to sell their house. The 3 of them share a small apartment. Their grandiose plans collapsed under the weight of their own dishonesty. I take no pleasure in their difficulties, but I do believe in the natural consequences of our actions. I learned that owning your worth is not just about property or money, but about refusing to let anyone diminish your value. Sometimes the greatest act of love is standing firm not just for yourself, but for those who depend on your strength. Age may change our circumstances, but it should never reduce our fundamental right to dignity and respect, especially from family. Every time I welcome Daniel and Ethan into my new home, every time I meet friends for coffee or join Theodore for a concert in the park, I am reminded that new chapters can begin at any age. What matters is not how others treat us, but how we respond to that treatment, the boundaries we set, and the self-respect we maintain. I often think about that confrontation day walking back into the house I had been forced to leave, head held high with Jackson Bennett beside me. The look on Amanda's face as she realized her plans had backfired was satisfying, I will not deny that. But the true victory was not in that moment of reversal, but in every day since living a life of my own choosing, surrounded by genuine love and respect. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have confronted your daughter-in-law the way I did or taken a different approach? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found value in my story, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to be reminded of their own worth. Thank you for joining me today, and remember, it is never too late to stand up for yourself and create the life you deserve.